inhabiting your breath as your breath inhabits your body. Relaxing into the sensations of the breath, and then letting that awareness permeate the whole body, from the top of the head, behind the eyes, relaxing the jaw and the neck and the arms and the shoulders, down into the abdomen, letting the spine come into alignment, settled into itself, into the pelvis, legs, feet, toes, arms, hands, fingertips. Breathing through the whole body, sensing through the whole body, coming home. Likewise, inhabiting the subtle body, the emotional body, tuning in to the felt sense you have this evening. Maybe it's a singular, strong emotion. Maybe it's something more mixed or diffuse. Something in the bottom of the belly, maybe, radiating out, inhabiting this emotional body, letting your energy flow through the muscles and the tissues, the organs and the bones. And your prana move through the subtle channels, especially in the center of the spine, from the base to the top of the head, everywhere in between. Notice how you are with whatever it is you happen to be holding, concerned about, or ignoring. Let your sensations flow, let your feelings flow. Letting yourself settle ever more deeply into the wholeness of your being. whatever comments arise in your mind, letting those flow as well, neither blocking thoughts nor following them. Rather, sitting back, upright, resting in the all-embracive fullness of your awareness, multidimensional sensations, feelings, thoughts, images, perhaps, and letting it all flow through without interference of the mind. If you find yourself getting hijacked by a thought form and you're inside a thought bubble, let that relax and come back to your breath, to your body, to your felt sense. So come home. if you're not getting carried away, and just let yourself relax into presence, into the spaciousness of your awareness. Enjoy being here. Enjoy sentience as such. And let it rewire the system. Non-distracted presence. If your mind is particularly busy, best to stay close to your breath, your sensations. Closing the eyes can be helpful then. But if you're more at ease, let those sense doors all open very gently, allowing your awareness to be more panoramic, inclusive. Also, if you're drowsy, it's good to open those eyes. There's no place to get to. Nothing needs to be achieved. Only don't be distracted somewhere else. Stay here, just now, where everything happens. Whatever comes, let it come. Whatever goes, let it go. Relax all grasping. For those of you in the live stream, that was the sound of the bell being rung. So we're going to have a stretch break for those who'd like a stretch, or if you have to go use the loo. Just 3 or 4 minutes. So integrative Dharma. Above all, when we talk about integration, we talk about dissolving the divided consciousness into its undivided, non-dual, awakened nature. Not de-integrated in the sense of everyday dualistic vision where we feel that we're separate from others and from the world. This totally normal subject-object split, this divided consciousness. I want to let that division collapse and dissolve into its natural, naturally spacious awareness. This is the point, the main point. So we can understand integrative on different levels, in different ways. Because even though we may have had a glimpse of our non-dual actuality being a part of what is rather than apart from, even though we've had a taste, it's hard to maintain. The old patterns, old habit formations uh, impose themselves very quickly. And so there's an arc of practice, a way that we need to work with ourselves in order to improve the odds of touching into our uncontrived nature rather than hanging out in our contrivances, our constructions, our opinions, emotionally charged. So today is a kind of auspicious day, at least for Americans. Because on the one hand, you have Reverend Martin Luther King. And on the other hand, you have President Donald J. Trump, one of which is a total advocate for integration in multiple ways, not just racial integration, all forms of social justice. The other, not so much. So it made me think, as I was sitting today, those of us who are old enough to have watched Looney Tunes, cartoons, where you'd have an angel over here and the devil would be up here. And it's kind of like that, that we have both propensities within ourselves. We have our MLK, but we also have our inner Trump, wanting to have things our own way, enforce our will, have our opinions, um, bend people to our will. Both are true. And both occur when we feel apart from the flow, the spontaneity of what's actually happening. And we're caught in attitudes of being for and against. So being caught in our self bubble, we need to work with that. So in the path of Dharma, Buddha Dharma, there's three general streams that come together to form, the way I see it, as a holistic arc of practice. So we begin with being pretty out of control, pretty distracted, chasing one thing, running away from another thing, liking this, disliking that. And we can see, like by virtue of today, and Donald Trump on the one hand, and Martin Luther King on the other hand, how we're caught in liking and disliking, and how charged our system gets around that. We can see how we buy in to the belief, which we take as a fact, that there is an external world separate from us who are experiencing it. So one of the most radical observations of Shakyamuni Buddha was to point out that that world, that reality is an illusion in the sense that it's our own projection, our own construction. That the suffering of samsara is something we're participating in. We're doing it. We're imagining this division of ourselves from the whole. And this gets elaborated intensely in all kinds of ways. Our preoccupations with things, anticipations, reminiscences. That's always self-contained. So we begin with the path, on the path usually, with trying to discipline this mind that's just reacting to this and reacting to the other thing. We're out of control, undisciplined, we say monkey mind. So the beginning of practice, we go in a narrow way. We say Hinayana, a narrow way, where we close our mind, close our eyes rather. We close our eyes and we deal with ourselves. The so-called Hinayana, the narrow way, it doesn't mean narrow-minded. It means disciplined. So we don't get so distracted. And we learn to come back to presence rather than being carried away uh, with our reactions and our fixations, our constructions. And in settling down, quieting down, sitting still, not so easy to do really, because all sort of stuff that's unsettled in us becomes more prominent. our repressions begin to lift, which they want to do, and they do once we stop trying to run from them. And so as we deepen, quite naturally, we begin to open ourselves. So this is another way that we could talk about integration, dissolving our sense of separateness through opening ourselves to what is rather than pursuing what we think is. Experience as it is rather than as we think it is. Conceive. We move from conceptualizing and objectivizing to more subjective presence, thereby refining our consciousness from being concept bound, emotionally driven, to being more light, more intuitive, more feelingful, which allows us to attune to our interconnectedness with everything from the heart. So then we say this is a wider way of working with ourselves and our experience and others. Mahayana. Also, as we settle more deeply into our experience, it becomes apparent things aren't as solid as we've been making them out to be. Because we're contributing to the solidification of our experience, which is actually a fabulous discovery, a fabulous point that samsara isn't something out there. Sometimes we think of it like that, or karma. We say, "Oh, this is my karma. It like something like happened to me." But once we start seeing that we're creating our karma, then we can also have the choice not to create it. If our suffering is something we're doing, then we can also not do it. If that wasn't the case, then we'd be really screwed, because things would be solid. And there would be really very little we could do except try to make it a little not worse. Find a comfortable place, have a bigger house, have more power. On one shoulder there's the angel, on the other shoulder there's a tight demon. Height, loose, height, loose, light, tight, angry, resentful, revenge, generous, forgiving, relating, opening, closing, walls, military, not unilateral disarmament. I drop my shields. We can go either way. The Dharma takes a side on this, is not neutral. Because if we go more and more dense, more and more suffering, and the whole thing of Buddha Dharma is a suffering and the end of suffering, we want less. So we go this way, loving kindness. Very deliberate, it's a choice. So we work with compassion and also working and attuning more to the fact that I'm not always right and that I need to relate to you and see things from your perspective. And then we can supercharge that with practices like Tonglen, of course, then we begin to tune into the fact of our illusion, the non-solidity of our experience. It's not fixed, it's fluid. It may be frozen, but that can be thawed. Our experience can be thawed, and so we need not be so brittle and tight. So this is where the Mahayana emphasizes this so-called emptiness, this openness of experience, the insubstantiality of things, the groundlessness of our experience. Groundless, but groundless in a kind way, a compassionate way, a lovely, right way. As we, as we become more used to being open, then the only game is how to keep going. So we say Vajrayana or Tantra. Tantra is a Sanskrit word that means continuity. Not the usual continuity, the repetitiveness, the compulsive repetitiveness of samsara. Now that keeps continuing, getting caught in the sense of being separate from the all. But the continuity of presence, of open-hearted, open-minded clarity. So Tantra now will emphasize the clarity aspect of our openness, of the vastness of our awareness, of our consciousness. So the program, as it occurred to me, the program of awakening could be understood within a mandala of self-liberation. Calm down, settle down, stop going crazy, and letting that settledness tune in to what's happening. And so we begin psychological work of integrating the split off sides of ourselves. So this is very prominently talked about in psychotherapy for people who suffer dissociation. We want to integrate those split off parts. It's explicitly talked about at that level of fragmentation. But we all have that, even those of us who suffer only on the neurotic level. There's certain places we don't like to go. There's certain people we don't like to be around because we get triggered. We may have various kinds of unresolved trauma. So we try to be protective of ourselves. We've learned we need to do that. But those protections are forms of armoring, aren't they? They protect us, but at a cost. We have our walls up and we patrol them. There's surveillance. We have our eyes out for danger, military level. So the path necessarily involves opening up to those things. And that in itself is integrative. It's not like another thing we need to do. This is the kind of streamlined beauty of the Dharma. that there's really only one core practice. We could say mindfulness or awareness. On, in doing that, there's all sort of ancillary practices, facilitative practices that can help us to negotiate what's difficult, to open to what's difficult, painful, unwanted, to open to our tendency to hold on to what we like and the way we want our things to be, our security arrangements. The Dharma, the practice, meditation allows us to let that loosen because it wants to loosen. And as we sit, we find that out because stuff comes up. So we relax, we tune in, and allow that attunement to deepen so that we can recover our consciousness that's been displaced into objects and projections and repressions. Sometimes we speak of recovery. Somebody, when we have have had an addictive issue, we say, now I'm in recovery. But we can use that also much more broadly to recover how we lose ourselves in objects, thinking there's an outside separate from the inside, separate from the subject that's able to objectivize things, give them names, interpret them, put them in perspective, sometimes put them also in a better perspective. That can be helpful to objectivize. So we wanted to deepen so that these boundaries that we have, the external ones, between self and other, self and world, but also the internal ones, the stuff we're aware of, conscious, and then we have our unconscious. That barrier, we want that to be more permeable too, so that we can become more integrated, psychologically integrated. This is helpful. This is the great goal of psychotherapy. To take, as my mentor, my friend, later my student, Jim Bugental, would say, we want to go from this to this. And getting to there changes a life. Then we have more wiggle room, more flexibility. He saw that, I think, accurately and humbly. He was a very honest practitioner. From that, a little more to this. Breathing easier. Being able to be more myself rather than who I'm supposed to be, who I think I'm supposed to be. Let myself be who I am, warts and all, without having to be so embarrassed or self-critical or self-hating. This is a major breakthrough to get to that place where you're not critical of yourself. Well, that would be nice, huh? That's really important and good psychological work, also, of course, on a spiritual path. And in particular, it's important on a Buddha Dharma path, which is all about existential sobriety, not trying to get to a bliss state or get to a peaceful state removed. No, this is not the Dharma. These are sidetracks. The Dharma, we want to integrate everything and awaken the way things are not escape to a bliss realm or a realm of clarity, intellectual, or the beach, where I'm just coming back from, just kicking it, oblivious, just peaceful. We want to use a peacefulness, calming down in order to tune in order to let that attunement deepen. And then the distinguishing breakthrough to see that it's all a fluidity, insubstantial. That I am not who I think I am. And my experience is not as I take it to be. It's moving, always transforming and moving and fluid, not fixed. This insight into selflessness, into emptiness. To register it, it happens actually a lot more than we realize. In a quiet moment, in a loving moment, in nature, in your garden, whatever your thing is, the thing you love, there'll be a moment where, but then to like get it, ah, this isn't an altered state. This is an unaltered state. And it's not even a state. It's a spacious awareness that is naturally compassionate, naturally saturated in well-being, being as such a part of the whole. And then to let this unconditional presence be, let it continue. How? This is where it's very different. This is now we're into the Dzogchen world. There's no thing to do. Nothing must be done. Non-doing is the way. So we see in this mandala, in this arc, in the beginning, there is definitely something to do. We need to gather our wits. We need to exert some control. Otherwise, we're spinning out here to there in the third place. So we need to collect ourselves. That takes effort and discipline. But then to let the work proceed and to let ourselves be opened by our practice. And in being opened, realizing the interconnective tissue between us and everything. And letting that sink in. So we say integrating the three yanas. By refining our awareness to its potentialities, rather than narrow focus, concept focus, emotional investment, relaxing that, letting the drivers of that arise, persist, and pass away. Whereas we become more and more trained to just sit back in the awareness, in the field of awareness, within which all of that's happening. The awareness of ourself that has been with us since we've been this high. We've had this. We think it's an entity. We make it into a fixed entity of me. But that's just a constriction. And then we defend and promote that entity. So we want to relax that aggression, that fear, by befriending it. So first, we create the circumstance to do that, discipline, and then we open that. We open that up. And we let that openness be. So, so this integrative Dharma, there's going to be an affinity group that's going to start back up again. It's already gone last year. Kind of began with me. And so we're going to continue again with me. But also, this is happening with Adam and John. It can happen in many places, not just me. So we're going to focus on combining these three yanas, basically the practice of shamatha vipassana, tonglen, and dzogchen. We're going to work in that affinity group in a way that's very experience near, so that we don't get ahead of ourselves, but also so we don't get behind ourselves. So we're going to have this sense of play, and then we'll use this book I wrote, which has this mandala of self-liberation in it, as a kind of a very loose reference. It's not going to be like the Lojong, Training the Mind of last year, where we kept very, very strictly to the slogans. We're not going to do it that way. We'll pull upon things. So the first thing we're going to pull upon is, here we're in this predicament. How is it that even though I know better, even though I don't want to, I still get caught in my opinions and my emotional reactions, and then these things that niggle from the past, whatever these habit patterns are. Sometimes we can track them to old trauma, maybe, how we were raised, developmental trauma. Maybe we can do that. But sometimes we can't. Sometimes our attitude, the way a boat has attitude, that it lists, we carry ourselves in a certain way, we hold ourselves in a certain way. Sometimes that holding is ancient. We can't say when it began. So Buddhist psychology will say, this is a long time coming, not just one lifetime. We have karmic dispositions, predispositions, habit patterns that are very deeply rooted. Western psychology doesn't go there. Buddhist psychology does. So we're going to encounter that. We're going to listen to that, look into that, into the operating system of self-centeredness, of divided consciousness. How does ego work? Because it's been spelled out. There's the kind of basic psychology, which we're going to go into in this group. And then there's the more advanced one, which maybe we'll do next year or later in the year. I don't know. If we're interested, we want to, we can do that. So that's how this affinity group, this series, this section that we're just kind of we're letting it evolve. We're going to do that and it's going to be collaborative. So it's a kind of a weird thing, because on the one hand, there's like a course or a series, and that's kind of how I Adam and I were thinking of it. It was actually his idea. I was thinking, I think it would be helpful to do some Buddhist psychology. And he goes, yeah, how about your book? Can we use that? And I thought, well, that's nice because it's already spelled out there, not elaborated, but it's spelled out. And so I thought, okay, we'll do that. And then the affinity group wanted to start back up again. So I thought, well, that's even better. Because I don't want to do a course, really. We'll do this as Sangha, brothers and sisters in the Dharma, and let that evolve as it evolves. So that's what that is. Integrative Dharma, like these ways, integrative in terms of the yanas, integrative in terms of our own experience, integrating, first of all, ourselves psychologically, but then integrating with awareness as such, dissolving this sense of separateness into its actual, unbound, unconfined nature. So that's what I had to say. So now we're going to open it up to talk about integration, integrative Dharma, um, whatever comes up for you, whatever questions or comments you have. Both in here and online.
This is Jen from the hall. Robin? We'll probably see Robin in a minute. I actually have a question. Can you talk about the difference between the word objectivize and objectify?
It's basically the same word.
Okay.
It's the same thing.
Thank you.
One has an F, the other has a V.
Good to know. Robin, anyone on Zoom?
Hi, everyone on Zoom. If you have a question, you can just raise your emoticon hand or wave, and we can call on you.
Okay, and we do have another question in the hall, so I'm going to pass the mic. Start with your name and hold it close.
This is Carol, and I'm holding it close. You said something that intrigued me. About it's my illusion that I'm separate from the world. What is not separate from me. And I understand what you're saying. I don't quite feel it because what is, what is. So maybe, I don't know if you can say more about it or um, about my senses, the separateness of what is when I don't like it, or I see what is and I walk the other way, or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not really a question, but it's a question.
Yeah. Well, you're pointing to the dilemma that we all share. Because in general, we live in dualistic vision. There's like the very concrete version, but then there's a more subtle kind of everyday sense. And so it's very easy to like and dislike things because we keep ourselves apart. We feel ourselves apart. So this boundary, this self boundary, is the thing we need to befriend. So wanting to walk away, and so when we have a reaction, these are very valuable because then we know what it is we need to befriend, what we need to warm up to. Not the thing that's out there that triggers us, but our aversion to the thing that triggers us. Yuck. Ugh. There'll be a clench, something like that. And so the more that we can drop our center of gravity, our center of our awareness from being, like this, reactive, off the top of our head, like this, and more it can be down in the belly, the more room we're going to have to catch it. And to tune into the emotional driver of the mental decision to run away. So this is where there's the practice of meditation, doing meditation, and then letting that permeate our lives to the extent that we are meditative. Not only when we're sitting on a cushion, but when we're making a cup of tea, when we're listening to an inauguration, which that can be a clue that we're already triggered. So the practitioner, the Dharma practitioner, not the citizen, I'm not talking about the American citizen, I'm talking about the Dharma practitioner at that point, turns that off and attends to what's going on inside. Withdraws the projection. We don't see it as a projection, we see it as a reasonable reaction. And our friend will agree that it's horrible or something. This is consensus reality. It's also, it's shared dualistic vision. There's ego, and as David Loy has observed, there's also we-go. It's the same problem. So check your breath. It'll probably be more shallow. Yikes. Ugh. The breath comes up, more shallow. Fight or flee. Fight, flight, or freeze. Very shallow breathing. I'm not here, or I'm going to deal with it. Something reactive. So then we do our practice. Why? Because we're out of ourselves. We're over there in the thing that's appalling us, for instance. We're out in that world, and we're not with our experience of that world. So this is the turnaround from always looking out to going back in. Make no mistake about it. This is the Dharma. This is the way. Now, very often people will criticize that. Oh, you're withdrawing, disengaged, blah, blah. Well, in order to be more present, in order to have not such a confused and agitated mind, but a clear, more inclusive mind, to make better decisions, to be a less troubled heart and an easier heart that can channel more compassionate responses rather than emotional reactions. Organic responses, heartfelt, rather than emotional, cognitive reactions. So we sit on that cushion. We do get more used to going within. And then we take it off the cushion into making our tea, into brushing our teeth, into our relationship. And we let ourselves more and more interrupt this continuity of our day, which is a continuity of dualistic vision. We interrupt that with moments of presence. mindfulness, spacious awareness, whatever we're capable of. You begin with mindfulness on an object, and later we let that expand into mindfulness of intersubjectivity, relational mindfulness, non so objective, a little bit softer, a little bit squishier, a little bit uh, more more flesh, and more into more spacious awareness within which relationships come and go.
Robin, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Ken. So we have a question in the chat from Bill, and he said you mentioned no need to do anything in the Dzogchen context. How does this fit in with the doing of the integration process you are teaching?
Really important question. There are these different paths. There's also very different practices. And it's important to respect the practice and the path as it's been transmitted. So every approach has a view, a meditative practice, and a way then of conduct, of embodiment. The Dzogchen way is very unique. It's different even than the Tantra way, the usual transformation way, which we got to already in the Tonglen. So in the Vipassana and in the Tonglen, there is effort, there is doing in the service of loosening and lightening and befriending. Well, first in the service of sobriety, and then with self-discipline, with some sobriety, now we soften. More Mahayana style. First, may I be free of my confusion and may I awaken. Mahayana style, how can I help you awaken? We'll go together. I won't leave you behind. Or even you go first. Okay, that takes a bigger heart. But there's still something to do. A lot to do, in fact. Way more to do than there is when it's just you. And you can just go into your retreat cabin, and forget about the others. Now when you have to think also about others, now there's more. But Dzogchen is different. But the view is also different, because normally we say there's a progression, that we go from samsara to nirvana. We go from being more dense to less dense, more closed to more open. So Dzogchen is extremely unique in the sense that when we get enlightened, where are we going to be when that happens? Here, okay. When we get enlightened, when is that going to happen? So trying to get somewhere else is a little bit self-defeating on that level, if you're drawn to it. If you're not drawn to it and it's kind of confusing, don't worry about it. Do your practice. But if you're drawn to it, then it's like, that's the view. And the view then entails some special stuff. Like having, the first thing, is having a direct experience and a direct introduction to the awakened state that's not somewhere else, but is always here and now. Having a taste, a glimpse. Ooh. And then working with, then it passes. The glimpse occurs, but there has to be that introduction. Once that introduction happens and there's a moment of presence, unconditional, unconfined, non-conceptual, and groundless, there's nothing to do. You're already arrived. Now it's very hard for us to accept that because we keep thinking in a progressive way. We're always getting somewhere. We always have our projects, right? We're always doing something. That's how the karmic mind operates, which we'll talk about in this affinity group. There's a project. We're always doing something. But in a moment of wakeful presence, there's nowhere else, there's nothing more to accomplish. So it's a practice of non-doing. It's the same thing in ancient Taoism, Lao Tzu Taoism or Chuang Tzu Taoism. Non-doing, very important there. Or Kashmiri Shaivism. There's various non-dual traditions that all understand the same thing. So if in a moment of open presence, relax. This is where the practice is one of relax and non-doing. But it's Dzogchen specific. How does that sound to Bill? You can unmute and speak up if you like. Or you can maintain noble silence. As you like.
Thank you, Ken.
Question in the hall.
I'm Linda. Haven't been here since before COVID.
Hmm.
Hello.
Hi. And that's before me, because I got here right after COVID.
Okay. Well, welcome both of us. So you mentioned Taoism and non-doing, Wu Wei would be the term. And it's, as I understand it, I don't speak Chinese and certainly not ancient Chinese. It's variously translated, and one of the translations I love as a practice is spontaneous doing or spontaneous action.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is whether it would be accurate in your experience to say that all of the practices are a preparation for allowing spirit to do through us, through the prisms of each of our individual beings.
I agree with you and Lao Tzu. That's the way I see it. Their preparation. Yeah. We don't want to take the preparation, make that our career. Unless we need that career. Because we're honest with ourselves and we know how we get carried away and we can't let spirit move through us. Instead, our mind is busy dominating. Our mind dominates, our emotions dominate. So, Wu Wei, the Tao, Dharma, can't have its way through us, have its way with us, and have its way through us. So we know that because we're in pain. And so we can be self-compassionate and attend to our twitchiness, befriend our monkey mind. We know that. So we do that. We do that narrow way as long as we need to. A whole lifetime may be plenty. We may need to do it a whole lifetime. It depends. But then maybe we don't. And if we don't, then we don't need to keep so narrow. We can broaden. How do we know if we should be narrow or broad or balanced? Figuring that out analytically isn't going to work. We've got to tune in. Call it intuition. Why not? Felt sense, the gut, knowing that comes from beyond the spirit. You can use many words. But what it isn't is conceptual. It doesn't put things in boxes. Opens boxes up. And then we can see how open we can be, where we're drawn. We could think, oh, maybe I'm not prepared, or I'm not good enough. That's a concept. Then we check and see, is it true? We have to check. Meditation, is it true? And then we follow our truth. We honor that. Self-honesty. You know, time for one more.
Great. Start with your name. Hold
I'm Vivian. It's nice to see you again. You just talked about befriending those parts of you that can contract or create separateness. And I have a lot of difficulty with that. I think I have a bit of self-hatred around those parts of me that are shy or are afraid to talk like this. Is there, to address it, if you just practice around it, like go into retreat, and does it, or do you have to directly like go, okay, this is it. When this happens, ego is so contracted and you have to look at it. But when I look at it, it doesn't melt it. It makes me dislike myself. So I'm just curious, like how you deal with parts of you that are so repulsive to your own self.
Yeah. So there's a couple qualities here that need to be wedded. Courage, the courage to see. But then the judgment can come on top of that. So then is the kindness. We need these two so bad. The wisdom and the compassion, the courage and the kindness together. So the courage maybe to see, and maybe it's humiliating, looking at ourselves straight on. That's a sign, actually a sign of progress. And being humbled, being humiliated. But then we can take that on as an identity. And sometimes we have that back of beyond. This identity, something wrong with me. This is very, very common. Extremely common. I really feel it's totally common. There's some way we have this attitude. We know something's off with divided consciousness. We know something's off, and then we try to feel better the rest of our lives. And they're always in doing the wrong thing. whether it's going desire or aversion or indifference, so forth. And so the practice is most potent when we have the courage to face things and the compassion to just relax the judgment. So that is dropping the awareness again from like whatever, the head, the seeing, the cognitive, the insight into, oh, and then to work with a way that we can be our own worst enemy. And so that's where sometimes, like just putting your hand on your heart and on your belly, sitting like that. Sweetheart, sweetheart. It's okay. It's just like talking to yourself can be very useful. It doesn't have to look like a Buddha sitting in his pose, right? You're just like, this is about warming and then breathing in to the self-judgment and the pain, underneath the story of the judgment and into the ugh of it. Oh, exhale. It's okay. And then just let that energy circulate, breathing into it, the felt sense, and then breathing out underneath the storyline, underneath the judgment, into the ugh of it. This is where the Tong Lin is so powerful. So this is a good, that's all we can say given the time we have this evening. But this is like so important, so shared. Mostly we try to hide that fact from others and also from ourselves. So the courage to see things, the self-honesty, is a real sign of progress. And then to befriend that and let it go, let it be, just let it be. Let it be, let it go. That's the instruction. You're a good meditator if that's what you're doing.
Thank you.
If you can befriend it and not worry if it doesn't go. It's not going. That's fine. That's good. Befriending that it's not going. And it's hard to talk about. It's such a personal thing for each of us. But I have found, and then I'll stop and Jen, then we'll do a quick meta. It's just so personal for everybody. So you have to find your own way through. Everyone has to find their own way through. So we say, there's 3 yanas, there's 3 paths, different Dzogchen, Vipassana, blah, blah. Yeah, those are general paths, but the way through is yours, through your steps alone. You can't follow anyone else's. You can be guided to the handrails, but then we have to do it ourselves because we all have our own unique knots. And so, by virtue of the merit we've generated here tonight, and listening to the Dharma, being opened by the Dharma, wrestling with it, may we give this merit away for the welfare of all beings. May all beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings be happy and nourish the causes of happiness. May all beings be free of attachment, hatred, fear, indifference, arrogance, and jealousy, and remain settled in great equanimity, loving kindness, sympathetic joy, and heartfelt compassion. May all beings everywhere be free